morning, Adam. How we doing?
Morning, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. No, we want to have you. We're 3 weeks today from the trade deadline, and so we'll probably get there in a moment. Kind of start with what you're seeing on the road trip. It is, looks very different from what we saw at home last week. What do you make of some of the, I guess I'll just call it inconsistency, ups and downs from this team this year?
Yeah, obviously the home road splits are obviously going to be pretty funky with this offense in particular. You look at Julio, he's example 1A of a guy who really seems to do well on the road and struggles at home. And you could probably go up and down the lineup outside of Cal Raleigh. But yeah, with this team, they're just so streaky offensively too. I feel like we're going to have these wild swings with this team this year. That's what we've seen. And we just haven't seen all facets of this team, right? We haven't seen the pitching come together at the same time as the hitting. When the hitting is up, the pitching is down. When the pitching finally gets right last week, the offense was just scraping by a little bit. So obviously they need everything clicking if they're going to stay in this wild card race. I'm not sure it's realistic to really inch back in this AL West, frankly, with what Houston's been able to do. But yeah, we're finally starting to see the vintage George Kirby coming back. And I think the next step really for this team, the biggest key for me is kind of getting Logan Gilbert back to being the guy we saw the past couple of years. Obviously the injury hiccup was a big reason for that, but he had a great 4 innings the other night at Yankee Stadium. Then that rain delay, who knows what would have happened if not for that. But again, to me, as much as people want to talk about Julio, I look at Logan Gilbert being the workhorse, being the ace of this staff the past couple of years, and kind of looking at him getting right and really leading this thing and getting this thing, this rotation back on its feet.
And I think it was the first month of the season, Salky talked about not just the home road kind of differences and splits for the offense, but what about for the pitching dynamic as well? The difference between pitching in the home confines and some of these road trips and going out, and especially against this lineup and in this bandbox. How about the challenge of pitching away from home as well?
I mean, we've seen it the last 2 nights. It's a perfect example. Again, you could kind of use the rain delay as an excuse, but still, giving up all those runs, 9 runs last night. And yeah, it's your number 5 starter and Logan Evans, but a pitch here, a pitch there makes all the difference, as you said, against a good Yankees lineup. But this team is built on run prevention. That's what they are, a run prevention operation. That's where they spent the bulk of their money over the last 5 years or so. They expect to have a good defense every year. That's a big reason why we're seeing a rookie in Ben Williamson getting as long of a runway as he has. And yes, he's been really good defensively, so that's why he's holding down that spot. But not many teams would sacrifice as much slug, as much offense as they are to have a defensive player at third base at that position in particular. But this is who they are. They're a run prevention unit. And when they're on the road, no matter where they are, Yankee Stadium, Fenway, wherever it is, they cannot give up, obviously, 9, 10, 11 runs every night and expect to compete. They're just not built that way. So they kind of have to get back to their identity, something Dan Wilson loves to talk about, just their core roots of who they are. And that's going out and pitching and shutting down teams and then turning it over to the back end of a bullpen, which, frankly, is about as good as anyone in baseball. So to me, it's getting that pitching staff healthy, getting back to who they are, preventing runs more than they are just about going out and out slugging teams.
Yeah, I was talking about that bullpen early this morning because, we get a bunch of texts late at night during the game. This team stinks. They're awful, this and that. And some of that is just obviously the emotional frustration of watching a baseball game. But when they don't get to use that bullpen, right, when they don't get to go to Brash and Munoz and Spire, it's taken one of the great weapons out of their arsenal. And so they don't look like necessarily a great team when they don't have the opportunity to use one of the things that makes them at the very least a good team.
Yeah, we saw it last night too. It was a little surprising to me. I think we saw a little bit of a shift. We saw Dan Wilson sort of show his cards a little bit and went to Carlos Vargas there in the 5th inning. I don't know if we've seen him that early this season. Carlos Vargas, no, he's not Matt Brash, he's not Andres Munoz, but he's been a bit of a revelation out of the bullpen this year. He's been really, really good for them and provide a lot of stability. So for Dan to go to Carlos Vargas there in the 5th inning when they were down still a couple runs, it showed me just how important that game was for them last night, knowing that they still want to stay competitive in that series. He had Gabe Spire up I think he would have gone to Brash next if they were able to kind of keep it within a couple runs there. Of course, Julio misplays that line drive in center field, and kind of that inning gets away from them, and they have to pivot there. But again, that's the whole thing lines up. We've seen that on the last road trip. We saw it in the last homestand that, when things are lined up and they have their guys, they're able to go to Vargas, Brash, Spire, Munoz. They are a really, really hard team to beat, and they're able to hold on to those one-run leads really regularly. And again, that's just how they're built. They're not built to go out and win 6-5 games. We're so accustomed to seeing this team over the past few years win those 2-1, 3-2, 4-3 games, and that's what they're going to have to get back to, because that's just how they're constructed. That's who they are.
Adam, I know you wrote a great piece, last week or so, and a bunch of the trade candidates, and we'll get to that here in a second. But is it your understanding that really it's all hands on deck with the draft this Sunday? Like, you don't anticipate anything happening really on the trade front before this draft?
Correct. I'd be stunned if anything happened, just because it's not just the Mariners, and the whole industry has kind of gone into hibernation here leading up to the draft. And this is such an unpredictable draft too. So I think it's made it even more challenging, particularly for teams drafting in the top 10, like the Mariners there at number 3. No one's quite sure what's going on. It's really funny checking in with folks around the industry. Like, some people think they have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen 1 through 5. Some people are just throwing up like, no one knows what's going to happen here. And so you almost have to chuckle, because the Mariners finally get a top 3 pick the first time in forever since Zunino, I think. And now there's not even a clear superstar. There's not an obvious 1, 2, 3 there. And so who knows? The MLB draft is obviously so unpredictable anyway, but it just feels like this time around it's even more so. So everyone's kind of into hibernation, and they'll probably peek their head up again after the All-Star break next week, really dive into the MLB trade deadline. There just aren't any trades to make right now anyway, even if the draft wasn't there. There are just too many teams still within reach of a playoff spot. Again, we circle back to the Arizona Diamondbacks more than anyone. They're kind of still hanging on by a thread. They still want to stay in it. Everyone's kind of looking at them and the Orioles and a few other teams to finally kind of acquiesce and say, okay, we're going to be sellers here.
Talking to Adam Jude, the Seattle Times, who I've mentioned a bunch of times, just doing a phenomenal job on that beat. Everyone should have someone near them go take a sabbatical and give you the opportunity to just be like the primary guy. It's just working out gangbusters for Adam, who's been awesome on the beat this year. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see him. He's on video with us this morning as well. You mentioned the Diamondbacks. Gets me thinking, man, that's sweep in Arizona. If you turn just those 3 games around, what a totally different season this is. And all of a sudden they're 7 games, 8 games out in the wild card, and they're definitely selling, and you really have an opportunity to do something. What do you think it takes? I mean, they got 2 guys that fit, one on each corner of this infield. What do you think it takes to get both guys from Arizona?
Yeah, it's not going to be cheap, of course. And I would say even they've got all 3 things you really need right now: first base, third base, and, a 7th, 8th inning relief guy too, and probably Shelby Miller or one other piece too. I think ideally the Mariners would love to repeat what they did last year, go out and get 3 pieces, an impact bat for the middle of the lineup like Randy Arozarena, some sort of supplemental bat like Justin Turner, and then a 7th, 8th inning leverage arm too, like they had in Jimmy Garcia last year. The Mariners would love to do that. Again, I don't think that's realistic given this market and given that there are so few sellers out there. But I do keep circling back to Josh Naylor at first base there. He's just such a perfect fit for what the Mariners need right now. Again, you step back and go, well, what's it going to cost if the Diamondbacks eventually get there and are one of the few sellers and Josh Naylor is one of the few bats available? The asking price is going to be really high. Are you really willing to give up a top 10 prospect for 2 months of Josh Naylor? He's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. So is Gino Suarez. Yes, the Mariners have a big trade chip in Harry Ford. They don't have an obvious spot for him. It might be what it takes to even get 2 months of Josh Naylor. I think I would do that, but at the end of the day, can you really give up 6 years of club control for a Harry Ford, a guy who looks like he can probably be a regular catcher in this league with really intriguing offensive upside for 2 months of a Josh Naylor? If you can guarantee yourself that'll get you in the playoffs, sure, it makes sense to me. But at the end of the day, That's why Jerry Dipoto, that's why Justin Hollander get the big paychecks and they make the tough decisions, because it's not going to be an easy one. I feel like it is going to be a painful trade deadline for the Mariners one way or the other. Either they're going to be disappointed they didn't get the bat, or they're going to be disappointed in how much they had to give up to go get 2 months of a rental player.
It's funny. I would say the easy answer to that question is yes, but with a asterisk on it. Yes, I would absolutely give up Harry Ford to get 2 months of a guy like Josh Naylor, unless there's a way to package Harry Ford in a deal to get somebody with more than 2 months of club control, right? And that's when you start having these kind of dreaming big conversations about the Braves selling with Acuna or with Matt Olson or anyone else. Do you have a thought on some of the longer term possibilities that might be out there?
Yeah, I really don't think Atlanta is in a position to sell any of their core players. I mean, Ronald Acuna Jr. Might be the most talented player in baseball, and he might have the most team-friendly contract in baseball too. I just don't see any scenario where Atlanta's going to go, yeah, okay, we'll give him up. Even if the Mariners offered a Juan Soto type package like the Nationals got, like even then, I think that the Braves would probably balk at that. Again, that might go down. That Soto trade might go down with James Wood as one of the best trades of all time. But even then, like you're talking about prospects versus what they know is, again, maybe the best player in baseball when he's healthy, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Matt Olson is a guy I've thought about too. Makes a ton of sense, obviously, for what the Mariners want, but he's under a pretty fair contract too, and he's one of the best power hitters in baseball. Again, I just don't see the Braves giving up any of those core pieces in Austin Riley. I've asked around the industry a little bit. Everyone would said they would be stunned if the Braves did something like that, even with as disappointing as this season has been. I know you guys have talked about Alex Bregman too. That was another sort of pie in the sky one I threw out. Obviously the way the Red Sox are playing right now, looks like they're going to be more buyers than sellers at the deadline. But a lot can happen in 3 weeks. The Mariners could fall flat on their face and have to reassess and sort of straddle that line in a few weeks from now too. Who knows? A lot can and will happen in a few weeks, and that's what makes this deadline so intriguing, just because we don't know. We can throw out these names, and this is still that time to, like you said, dream big. Why not? But it is really unpredictable. If I had to bet anything right now, I'd say the Mariners aren't going to be able to make a big splashy move, just because there aren't going to be that many guys available. And I know that's not what Mariner fans want to hear, but I think that's probably the most realistic scenario at this point.
If you were to gauge in your conversations with folks around the Mariners, their interest level in the market, though, how would you characterize that? Do they want to be hyper aggressive?
Absolutely. If you guys know Jerry Dipoto, you know he wants to do something. And I think as frustrated as Mariner fans were, as everyone was at the lack of activity over the winter, I think that front office was just as disappointed as anyone else not to be able to kind of get that one bat or that one meaningful addition that obviously this roster, everyone could see that they needed. So they're itching to do something. I think whether you believe in this roster building philosophy or not, the Mariners have used the trade deadline the past few years as such a key part of their roster addition and of their sort of core building philosophy. You look at Randy Arozarena and Luis Castillo in particular, two of the most important guys on the roster, and those are two of the biggest trades that have been executed at the trade deadline in baseball the last few years. And I feel like Jerry, if the opportunity presents itself, Jerry and Justin will go out and pull that trigger again. Again, what prospect are you willing to give up? They're willing to give up something. I can tell you that. They've proven that. They've said that again. They know this roster. They know this team is close. They're fighting. They're hanging on here even through all the pitching injuries. And they're going to go out and try. Whether trying is good enough at the end of the day, we'll find out. But they certainly are going to try.
You're getting to cover one of the great seasons of all time so far by Cal Raleigh. How cool is that? What has been your favorite Cal moment, either on or off the field, of being around him and covering him this year?
I'm actually trying to wrap up a big Cal Sunday story right now, leading into the Home Run Derby and the All-Star break, and I'm able to catch up with a lot of his old friends and family. And, I'll give you a little nugget. I talked to Justin Turner this week, obviously briefly a Mariner last year, but I could see those two connect right away on the side of the cage every day. Justin would talk to anyone and everyone about hitting, but him and Cal really just hit it off right away. And I could just see something, kind of a light bulb a little bit for Cal Raleigh. I wanted to revisit that, track down Justin Turner this week, and it was really intriguing. I learned a lot because I was just trying to learn as much of how is Cal doing this? What is happening beyond just the swing mechanics? But he's obviously entered a different stratosphere here. And you talk to anyone around him, anyone that knows him, people that have known him for a long time. No one is happier for him than the people around him, because he's the first guy to deflect credit. He genuinely is so humble and modest about all this. He's not a guy that seeks out the attention. Yeah, he's on ESPN. He's doing all these interviews, it feels like, every day. And everyone's asking him about the nickname. Where did that come from? They love the nickname. And he's just got this natural, everyman quality about him. One person described him to me as the beer in the shower type of guy. And I thought that was just so perfectly described Cal Raleigh. Like, that's who he is. He just feels like he's one of us, except he's got the Paul Bunyan power, right? And, it's one of the best, like, out of nowhere stories too. And I think that's what makes it such a great nationwide story right now, is no one saw this coming. Who is this guy with the crazy nickname and the crazy power? And it's been fascinating. Like you said, I've been trying to dig into it more, and just all the way going back to when the Mariners almost didn't draft him and how they signed him at the very last minute. And just kind of the way he's built up and made himself into the superstar he is. It's a pretty fascinating story.
So no concern that the humility is all fake after seeing the video of him at 8 years old and saying he's the man. No concern. It's inauthentic.
You love to see a kid, man. That's the everyman quality. Wasn't that all of us?
100%.
In the backyard, and that's my kids right now. And it's just, it could not have happened. You hear everyone say this could not have happened to a better guy. He deserves it as much, if not more, than anyone. And I truly believe that. I've been around him the past few years now, but seeing him up close every day, he's the first at the ballpark, the whole cliche. First at the ballpark, last to leave. He's still working out, even after catching 9 innings every night. And my big question is, how long can you keep this going, of course, right? Because we've never seen this out of a catcher. And so we've never seen this out of a catcher in the second half of the season. As it gets hot in July and August and September, are his legs going to stay fresh? Is he going to have to get off his feet a little bit more defensively? Those are some questions here for down the road, but I think those are legitimate ones too.
It's funny you went there, Salk. I thought you'd go with Passon's piece coming out. When did Passon say his piece is coming out?
Next week. He said it was going to be the best one.
Monday,
so yeah.
And we asked kind of Passon, like, why do you think that's going to be the best? And he simply said, because he wrote it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, head-to-head with Passon, do you feel better about your article, or who's going to have better nuggets? What are we thinking?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah. Passon's as good as there is going right now, so I should probably keep him out.
No.
I'm excited about mine. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
Well, what about Divish coming back? How's all this going to work? Is Divish even going to be invited back? Is he for sure back? How's all this going to sort itself out?
Wally Pipp situation?
Yeah, I heard he almost got kicked out of his first Legion game. I heard a couple weeks ago, just narrowly hung on there. Didn't pick up any bases, I don't think yet. But shoot, last I heard they were 19-3 in conference there in Montana.
Wow.
He might get a new contract for next year. So who knows? We'll see.
Okay.
Hey, that guy.
Just to come back to this team for a moment, talking to Adam Jude, who has been on the Mariner beat all this year, and before that too, doing a great job for the Seattle Times. Last month or so, all the conversations about small ball seem to have kind of disappeared. What is that? Just the weather changing? What's happened to the aggressive small ball Mariners?
Yeah, I think even some of that, I think the last sack bunt we saw, I'm probably misremembering this a little bit, a couple weeks ago from J.P. Crawford. Turns out that was J.P. Crawford doing it on his own. It wasn't a called sack bunt either. I found that kind of funny in the moment. But, yeah, I do think some of that was overblown, even if you think back to last year. Yeah, we saw some of it just because we never saw any of it with Scott Service, right? But I think Dan Wilson is – he's learning on the fly. He's had to learn on the fly. He's never done this before. And the people you talk to around him, like, he's so good at culture building and connecting in the relationships. That's his sort of superpower. And then the last thing that was going to come was the X's and O's in the dugout, right? Which, of course, 7 o'clock every night, that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But, I think he's he's digging into the numbers a little bit more, let's say. I think he's understanding, the situations and maybe when to what tricks to pull out of his bag and when. And, there was even one last week, I think, with Cole Young. It looked like an obvious sack bunt situation with your number 9 rookie hitter. And he didn't do it. And Cole Young ended up, I think, striking out in that situation. Runners at first and second. But it was sort of like, look, he'd been on a nice little roll at that point. You want to give your young guy some confidence and let him swing away and try for the best there. It didn't work out. But I do think Dan Wilson isn't stuck in his ways. Like everyone thought he was going to be this super old school guy. I think shows that he's pretty flexible and he's learning on the fly here. It doesn't mean he won't go back to the sack bunt here and there, but certainly to your point, hasn't been a feature of his strategy.
Last thing too would be just what about, we've talked, every day I get texts about moving Julio out of the 2 spot. And, since you're in Divish's role right now, you have to deal with questions about the lineup. I'm not a big lineup guy in general. I really generally don't care that much. But the idea of a guy with a 305 on base percentage hitting ahead of Cal Raleigh is starting to, I think, become pretty noticeable, especially with JP and Randy Arozarena both getting on base at a pretty good clip. Could you move Cal up to 2? Could you move Randy up to 2 and keep Cal at 3? Is there an opportunity to maybe try to put some more runners in front of Cal?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, fair game, and something they'll certainly have to visit and talk about coming out of the All-Star break if things don't change with Julio. Again, Julio is as streaky as anyone. We've seen it throughout his career right now, and so you don't want to press the panic button if you're the Mariners and if you're Dan Wilson and cause Julio any reason for concern. At the same time, yeah, if Cal's doing what he's doing, you need people on base. You don't want solo homers. We saw him hit 4 homers last night, but you're not scoring enough runs at the end of the day. And it's a tricky balance, right? You need someone behind Cal Raleigh to protect him too, and you could argue that lineup protection is overrated as well. But they got to figure something out. And again, if they're able to make a trade at the end of the month, obviously some of those questions will answer themselves. But Julio is obviously an ongoing discussion, and it's more than the 30 seconds we have here. But there are a number of things there. And again, it's not that Julio's not trying and that he's not deserving of the All-Star selection or all that stuff. Like he's trying to figure it out. And at some point you feel like he's going to, because every summer he does. And so I think that's what the Mariners are banking on. I know that's what they're banking on. It's right there. He's so close. For me, he's just got to get in the box and be an athlete and stop overthinking things right now, because he seems to be in his head again. He seems to be just chasing every first pitch, no matter where it is. And we know how good he is. We know how good he can be. It's just a matter of him relaxing and getting in the box and see the ball hit the ball for me.